Hello everybody, hope you've been doing really well. In this video we're going to say that Gothic is not Gothic. That's right, Gothic is not Gothic. We are dealing with fake history, totally fake history. Gothic appeared after the year 1000 in the High Middle Ages, replacing the Romanesque style of architecture, and the Italians called it Gothic. It's not Gothic. Is it Atlantean? Let's investigate. By the end of this video, we're going to see exactly who originally built Gothic architecture and where all the elements of Gothic architecture originated. And it appears to be incredibly ancient. We're going to say, this was always here. This was always in Europe. And what happened was there was a catastrophe in the Dark Ages, and it demolished the more fragile buildings, leaving only the so-called Romanesque Roman buildings standing. And so afterwards we called those Romanesque. But actually I think the Romans built this, and they got it from the Etruscans, who got it from the Atlanteans. And let's look at this. And I'm really indebted to a friend, Tina Silva, for pointing this out, for contributing this. This is Milan Cathedral, and this is a better picture. And I want you to look at this very carefully. Just really look at it. What's going on? Well, it's white. It's white like the Giza pyramids, and it's approaching maybe the size of the Menkaure pyramid. And it is a pyramid. It is a pyramid with all these pyramids placed on top. I mean, just unbelievable. It is pyramids on pyramids on pyramids. That is one of the elements of Gothic style architecture. The windows are Romanesque, they're arched, but here you have Gothic windows with a peaked arch. And we're going to look at the different elements of Gothic architecture and try and analyse where they come from. And we're going to look at conventional explanations. We're going to look at unconventional explanations. One of the explanations is light. It's a light show. It's like a medieval cinema, because there was not very much entertainment when these were built. Books could not be... There were no printing presses, so there were no books, no newspapers, unless you were a monk or an administrator, in which you might have access to one or two books. So people would go here and watch the light show, watch what was going on in here. And the Gothic churches appeared in the 1200s at a time when it's sort of called the 12th and 13th century. There's a 12th century Renaissance, which is known to medieval scholars. And what happened was there was a huge population expansion. After the year 1000, Viking raids stopped. The European powers started to become strong. And I guess one of the reasons is solar activity began to peak. And this allowed plants to actually ripen, no failed harvests. Countries became strong militaries. And due to the population expansion, we went from tiny little churches in the Dark Ages to big Gothic ones, about the time when manuscripts started being produced en masse. So let's look at the traditional reasons for Gothic. Population expansion with increase in solar activity and the end of the Viking raids. Light was seen as divine. A manuscript, possibly from the Library of Alexandria, contained information that light was God. And they wanted to get light into churches. Also, they thought a bigger church makes a better spiritual experiences. So the churches, as we will see, got incredibly huge. Medieval cinema. It is medieval cinema in action, and it changes with the seasons. They aligned churches astronomically east to west so that sunlight would enter from different sides at different times of year, marking auspicious occasions. And of course the phantasmagoric Gothic architecture puzzled the imagination, and that's one of the aims of architecture, to create a puzzle for the imagination. And of course, in the 20th century, Gothic became absolutely obsolete. No more Neo-Gothic, which was 19th century, except for theatre and cinema design. This is a theatre in Melbourne, built in 1932. And as you can see, it's quite... it's almost like an Arab style of Gothic, Moorish style. One of the places where Gothic comes from, but not the place. Let's continue. The origin of the term. It was Giorgio Vasari, a polymath. He was an architect, an artist. Look, he painted himself. And he made this excellent book on the lives of the excellent architects and artists and sculptors. And he said the Goths destroyed ancient Roman buildings, replacing them with this style. And it was another guy, Gianozzo Manetti, a Florentine diplomat, who said the Gothic style was the barbaric prelude to the Renaissance. And we have taken what these two have said and others have said, and we have accepted this as if it was real. But I'm going to say it's not real. This is fake history. Because our perceptions today are all based on the limited understanding of this history. So, Gothic actually appeared everywhere at once in the 1200s. So I'm going to put it to you, it was rebuilding after a great catastrophe. It was rebuilding. But who were we rebuilding? And these are fragile buildings which would have been destroyed in any earthquake, any meteor, any asteroid impact. Because the strong-walled structures, the Roman structures, survived, and hence we've called them Roman structures. And they didn't collapse. So we think Romanesque is Roman, but that's not so. Because every Roman building until the 20th century was in ruins. And this is something that's not often pointed out. And we're not talking just ruined from age, but ruined because they collapsed and people carted away the bricks to reuse them. And they were never rebuilt because we were not economically capable of doing so. So what's going on? Why were so many Roman buildings literally in ruins for so long? I mean, the Romans were in the UK for 400 years, almost as long as they were in Italy. But almost nothing is left. The destruction seems to have been particularly strong in the UK. So, we're going to say that Gothic architecture is not actually a replacement. What it is, they are replacing older Gothic buildings. They're not building new Gothic buildings replacing Roman buildings. They're actually rebuilding. They were trying to rebuild the Roman Empire because it seems the Roman Empire built in Gothic. And this is a new theory. Never been done before. No one has announced this ever. But that's what I think. Because it just seems so curious to me that the Goths didn't even really build buildings. I mean, the Goths did not build buildings. They didn't have these big cities. So, actually, one of the elements, the Eastern arches, the pointed arches, yes, they are prevalent in the East. They were brought to Europe, possibly by Crusaders. But Gothic is also based on spires, Egyptian and pre-Etruscan, as we will see, possibly Atlantean, towering pillars and pyramids. So there's a Mayan connection. And the proof is this. Ancient Rome had millions of people living in Rome. The city, millions, tens of millions. But in Charlemagne's time, it was 50,000 or less. Now, is that just because of the plague of Justinian, the wars of Justinian, or did something more dramatic happen? Because it seems that Rome collapsed because it was no longer economically viable, but we have to ask why. What is going on? So let's look at the main elements of Gothic architecture. We have basically lots of pillars and peaks and lights and thin walls and these peaks, and this is representing the Trinity, almost like 3 pyramids of Giza, and isn't that interesting? And here you have again maybe the Great Pyramid, 2 other pyramids, lesser pyramids. They're all representing pyramids or something. This is one of the early Gothics, Reims Cathedral. Huge. Absolutely huge. They wanted to make it pyramid size, obviously. But isn't this an earlier religion? Isn't this descended from the Giza religion? And again, Reims Cathedral, and it's got buttressing, flying buttresses and curtain walls and very thin. It's all Gothic is held up by the structure itself, by the reinforcements, whereas Romanesque is held up by the walls. And Saint Denis, that's an early Gothic. It's slightly Roman as well, Romanesque arches, but then you got these other weird points and things. And we come to Cologne Cathedral. And you know, I'm sure many of you are familiar with planning committees. A committee is a group of people who when they make plans, They go into the night, they have a few beers, and by morning, they're ready to take over the world. But after a few days, the plans are forgotten when members begin to quit and everyone decides they have other things to do, family matters are more pressing, and all their great dreams go unfulfilled. And that happened here in the 1280s. It was decided to build the biggest cathedral in Europe in Cologne for some reason. And they started building. And it took them 600 years. It wasn't finished until 1880. You know, it needed the whole economic power of modern Germany to build this damn thing. But what were they trying to do? And it is very pyramid-like if you go there. And it's pyramids on pyramids on pyramids on pyramids on pyramids. And this is yours truly out the front. And I had to get into the next street. You can't just stand out the front and take a picture of it. It won't fit into the camera. So I'm in the next street, and it still won't fit in the camera. And this is not a fisheye camera. Notice it's all sloping inwards. It's like a huge double pyramid almost. It's like one huge obelisk. And isn't that interesting? Why aren't we asking why? And I guess one of the reasons why is, guess what? Cologne is a Roman city. It's Colonia Agrippina. It was the most the Romans ventured into Germany. It was the capital of Roman Germany. And it's really interesting. Is this a rebuilt Roman building? I mean, why on earth would a city which was, I suppose, not that powerful decide to build... It's not Aachen. Why did they decide to build this huge edifice that they could not complete? And I'm going to say, look, they were rebuilding something that was already there. And we know cities were already there. In a previous video, I said that all these lines... So these are St. Michael's Mounts. It goes through Delphi. Delphi looks like Sacsayhuaman. It's built on a mountainside. And it goes through here and ends in Armageddon. So Armageddon is actually the end of the road, which was why it was used. It's the end, and this road would have been all above sea level back in the day, tens of thousands of years ago. So we've actually recycled cities and city locations over and over. They haven't just sprung up. That's fake. And you see all the pyramid-like elements of this, the obelisk-like elements. It's just unbelievable. So Gothic is actually rebuilding, I think, what was there before the catastrophes of the Dark Ages, but because the medieval period was not very literate, we've forgotten this. And for 600 years, Cologne looked like this, Colonia, and this crane was here for 600 years. And because they ran out of money, eventually all the enthusiastic people who whipped up the town into a frenzy to build this damn thing just died off. And they were just, and the descendants said, well, yeah, what are we going to do with this? I guess we'll just leave it there, because why should we spend our money on the illusions of our fathers? And this is in Poland. This is another type of Gothic, brick Gothic that you see in the east, the Teutonic Knights. Again, pyramid-like thing up here and all this stuff going on. And then you have this. It's Nyon Cathedral. And look at these pyramids on top. And these actually are a type of pyramid. This is a pyramid religion common to Europe and Egypt, which has been incorporated into churches after that religion became obsolete. It's a clue. Salisbury Cathedral. Beauvais Cathedral. Beauvais Cathedral is amazing. Check that out. It's like a huge type of Tesla energetic weapon from the ancient period, but it's been rebuilt. So let's look at the inspiration of Gothic. And we are getting to the origin of Gothic, and you're not going to believe your eyes when you see what I show you at the end. But as you see, the towering pyramid-like objects did survive in the East, and these were placed around what survived of the Constantinople church. And bear in mind, this church was destroyed in an earthquake, but rebuilt, heroically rebuilt by the Byzantines. So even a Romanesque church can be destroyed in an earthquake. So of course all the ancient Gothic stuff is gone, but when the Turks arrived from the East retained the ancient tradition of these towering things. And this is one of the crossovers, the missing links, because this is in Sicily, and it shows the origin. It's early Gothic. It shows the origin of Gothic, partly from what the Crusaders brought back, but it's also got pyramids here. It's got a mixture of Roman arch and peak. And that's this is a Cairo mosque, and as you see, there's Gothic elements. Look at that, the peaked windows. So the Crusaders brought at least that element back with them. And this tower, amazing. And I said in another video, this Romanesque building is actually Roman, and the history is all faked. It's all been faked up. And the Normans simply rebuilt it, and you can see where they've rebuilt it right there. That patch. They never built it to begin with. They just rebuilt it. It's Roman. It's in a Roman medallion. And this is in Poland. And you see these twin towers? This is a Romanesque church in Poland on the crossover to Gothic. And there's these two pyramids here. Like two pyramids. Like the twin pillars of the Bible. And we're going to look at where this comes from in a moment. And you see this? That's an Etruscan tomb. Pyramid on top. It's like a big pillar. Like that. So Etruria, the pre-Roman era, it seems the Romans stepped into some Atlantean legacy. And that's a Mayan pyramid. Why am I talking about Mayan pyramids all of a sudden? Well, I think a Mayan pyramid is inside every Egyptian pyramid, because if you look at the collapsed Medum pyramid, it's basically a buttressed structure. And they're all probably like this, but archaeologists at the moment don't have the guts to say so. But if you would do a cross, I reckon they can carve into the Khafre pyramid and expose this. There are supposedly no internal chambers to disturb anyway. Let's have a look inside. And here's the evidence. I suggested in a much earlier video that the Tower of Alexandria, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, is actually a little thing the Greeks plonked on top of a Mayan-like pyramid, because this was a worldwide pyramid empire. And this is where those twin towers I showed you on so many cathedrals in Germany and Poland come from. They come from the twin towers on the Ramesses temple at Karnak. And this is almost kind of like a cathedral, especially in this front section here with all this this pillared hall. And then we come to this, Borobudur, and I've suggested Borobudur in Indonesia with its pyramids, these things on top of pyramids, on top of platforms, is essentially very close to Porsena's tomb. Porsena was an Etruscan leader who oppressed the Romans in 500 BC. The Romans almost killed him in an assassination attempt, so he decided to make peace with them, and that allowed Rome to expand and take over Etruria. But Etruria itself was a massive trading empire which retreated into a land empire when the Carthaginians expanded. And as we'll see in a moment, their buildings were Gothic buildings in 500 BC. But I want to show you something. This is known. This is on Wikipedia. And it is known that in Turkey, the late Romans built this peaked bridge. In Cappadocia, it's called the Karamagara Bridge. So we know this element of Gothic was already in ancient Rome. But not many people talk about it. But now I'm going to say, look, it was also already in Etruria. That's an Etruscan tomb. That's an Etruscan tomb. That's Borobudur. And if you do, I do encourage you to look into the description of Porsena's tomb, and I'll stick it in the link below. But basically, it was a massive structure with pyramids on top of pyramids. There was a ball with a pyramid on top of the ball, and a platform and more pyramids. So people have tried to envisage what it looked like, and the Romans did destroy this in the 1st century BC during a civil war. But it looked something like this. It was in Clusium. They think they found it, but I'm not convinced. And it was a massive structure. Pliny called it a massive monument to a man's ego, but they said the same thing about the Khafre pyramids. And this is essentially a Gothic style building, and there are lots of variations on what it would have looked like. Just a massive structure, hundreds of meters in height. So this other element of Gothic was already in Europe. That's another variation on what it would have looked like. These buildings were already being built in Europe, pyramids on pyramids on pyramids. Again, this is not an artist representation. And that's another one. So what do you think of that? So what I'm saying is, Gothic is not Gothic because the Goths didn't have these grand cities and they didn't build these grand things, but the much earlier peoples did, possibly the Etruscans or the pre-Etruscans, who would have been the Atlanteans, because they would have had a massive empire, a trading empire, the wealth of the New World. They did it in an unknown age. They built very fragile buildings which were destroyed in the Dark Ages by some catastrophe which absolutely obliterated the population of the world, especially Europe. And this is what happened. They tried to rebuild the buildings, And a couple people in northern Italy said, oh, the Goths did this. And since then, we've been calling it Gothic, but is it actually Atlantean architecture? Well, what do you think of that? Thumbs up if you like, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye-bye. So guys, I've actually got a few websites, charlescos.com, I've got, which is my main official website, and it's got information about, it's got articles, it's got extra information about the stuff I've talked about in videos or summaries of the information. I've also got whatisgiza.com, which is, I've tried to put almost every video up, as well as information about my book. And information about those videos. I've also got an older website, charles.cos.id.au, and that's got just a few pictures from my old adventures and things like that. So check those out. They're all linked below, and cheers.